I heard about the Hollywood Fringe Festival through a friend, who was doing it. And I'd heard about the Edinburgh Fringe, but I didn't know, and I know it's famous and incredible, and that's where some of the best artists are found. I didn't know there was a Hollywood one or New York one. And so my friend told me that she was going to do it. And I went to see one of her shows. And the theater where she set her show is actually part of the inspiration for the story of mine. And that's where we're also holding our show. So yeah, it was just the experience itself was really, really cool being around those artists and their shows.
I first heard about the Hollywood Fringe Festival more or less before it started. A friend of mine who was thinking of being on the board asked me if I would be interested in joining the board because he knew I'd been in Edinburgh a few years by then. I think the Hollywood Fringe started is it 2010? I think that's right. It was around 2010, if my recollection is correct. And I basically begged off because I got the impression that they actually were looking for an attorney to be on their board. And I, again, didn't want to, I sort of want to keep that separate from my producing life. And in any event, there were other reasons at the time. So I passed and they went ahead and put the festival up. I saw a show that year. I think I only saw one show that year. And I really liked it. It was really exciting. Smaller festival back then, obviously. And then I think I went back the second year and I met more people. And then I realized that, here's an opportunity to produce stuff at the festival you can produce stuff at the Hollywood Fringe for a fraction really of what it might cost if you were doing a commercial run for various reasons. And obviously in part because it's only a couple, 3, 4, 5 shows instead of 6 weeks of rental. That's one of the big reasons. But anyway, it's a very economical way of trying something out or getting a first time play that's never been made before premiered, just to sort of see how an audience reacts to it and stuff. So I kept going. I produced a play. My first production there was from Wales. A friend of mine who's a Welsh playwright, and now he's actually starting to become pretty well known over there. It was Richard Parker. It was a play about coincidences, and it wound up doing very well. It won Best International Production that year. And then I've produced a couple musicals since then and a couple comedies. Gold Baby came to my attention because one of the members of Gold Baby was an intern for Fringe Management in Edinburgh many years ago. And this woman moved out to LA, one of the performers, and she, was asking me to come see her in a couple of the plays she was in, which I did. She's really, really talented. And then she was telling me about this comedy troupe that she was involved in out of the Pack Theater. Do you know them on Santa Monica? It's kind of it's a comedy school / venue. And so this is one of the house sketch comedy groups at the Pack. And I came to see it finally. It took me some time to get over there. And I was really pleasantly surprised at how good it was and how funny and smart. I thought it was better than some of the sketch comedy I see in Edinburgh. And Edinburgh is supposed to be comedy mecca. And in any event, I was really impressed. And I mean, Kelsey is a great person. And I just said to her, like, we should do this at the Hollywood Fringe. So we were going to do it in 2019. And then obviously in 2020 rather. And then something came along, this COVID thing, and put the scotch on that plan. And now we're revisiting the notion of doing it at the Hollywood Fringe. So that's how I found Gold Baby.
Well, I heard about the Hollywood Fringe Festival by just probably some of it was my Google search of trying to do theater in Los Angeles, because my first production, Snap Honey, actually, I introduced to the Los Angeles stage in 2016, as well as 2017. 2016, I performed it at the Complex. In 2017, I performed it at Studio Stage in Koreatown. And then it might have been between 2017 and 2018 that somewhere in the passing, something or someone told me about the Hollywood Fringe Festival. early 2018, I decided to take a chance. Like I said, I had 2 years of experience in Los Angeles doing plays, but not as assembly line as Fringe Festival. That I found out and learned when I got there, that it was very strenuous, very by the numbers, very technical as far as striking, setting up in 30 minutes, do your show, don't go over the time, strike. And that was basically, that taught me discipline. It taught me about time, how important time is. And I enjoyed the experience to the point where I wanted to use that model for productions that I had done after 2018, because I also did the same play, Snap Honey, in Atlanta in 2019 at a studio, Good Acting Studio, GOOD, actually in Marietta, Georgia. And then the pandemic hit, because I wanted to do a play based upon the love relationship between Basquiat and Madonna in 2020, called Three-Way Love. Well, because of the pandemic and everything was new as far as this coronavirus was concerned, so I decided to tackle the Zoom play, which was totally unheard. I may have heard of Zoom in passing, but something just said, I wonder if I could do a Zoom play through Zoom. I did it. I debuted it at Hollywood Fringe's Fringe at Home, because they were kind of like not dismantling, but more of kind of in a panic as far as like, should they do a Hollywood Fringe during the pandemic? Should they cancel it? So they ended up just doing virtual Fringe at Home, and I debuted it there. Critics saw it. One particular critics nominated us for Play of the Year. We didn't win, but it was a feat, because that was a challenge of trying to do that. And like I said, the experience that I had with Hollywood Fringe in 2018, gave me that discipline. So this year I said, all right, I think it's time for me to get back into the Fringe community, physically be there, and just continue my presence with the community. Even though I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, I'm more of a transit, in transit person, a transplant rather. The Hollywood Fringe community has opened their arms to me, as though that I'm actually a resident, like a artist in residence in a way, but through virtual communications. I just felt it was time for me to reintroduce myself with the Hollywood Fringe since 2018, doing it physically on a stage, and reintroducing myself to people who don't know who I am, and to those who know who I am and followed my career since 2018 with the Hollywood Fringe Festival.
So I first heard of the Hollywood Fringe Festival thanks to that mentor I alluded, Elise, after she gave me guidance on helping turn Inversion into a full-length play. She's multiple people gave input that led to it becoming a full-length play, but she was the one most holding my hand figuratively, leading me along the process. She organized the initial reading and the stage reading, and then she was telling me, once I incorporated the feedback from their made revisions, that the next step would be putting it up at the Hollywood Fringe Festival. I never heard of it before, but I found out what it was, and it's like the most awesome thing, of hundreds of black box theater productions performing together, sharing theater space, and you just walk around from theater to theater watching different things. That sense of community is amazing. So then the feedback got from Inversion helped. I've continued to make revisions on it over the years, continues to get better and better. And then along the way, like I said, I've written Mother Grace, and it deserves the same sort of platform as Inversion. I'm just as proud of this one. Well, I wouldn't really call it, as far as the plot goes, I wouldn't call it semi-autobiographical the way I did the last one. Actually poured more of my real life emotions into this one. This stuff inspired by all sorts of things. And last year, Fringe was, I was about to say virtually shut down. I guess no pun intended. Everything was virtual. So it was Mother Grace's first ever stage reading last year. That made some improvements since then. And now, at least with a masked audience, we can perform in person. So that'll be amazing. I want to hope they're all moved by my work.
I heard about Fringe Festival a long time ago when I was in Italy. In Italy is a big time matter for who wants to do theater and for who wants to write for theater. If you participate to a Fringe Festival, it means that you are a real actor or a real artist able to be on a stage and to say something that matters, at least to you, at least. So when I moved to the US, the idea of Fringe Festival never crossed my mind. I've never thought that I could be so creative or good enough to join it. And then when I met Deborah DeLizio and I did this workshop with her about solo performance, and we staged it. After that, she told me, I think your show would be perfect for the Fringe Festival. And he amazed me and filled up my unfed ego so much. And so when I applied for it and have been accepted in 2019, so it was supposed to be 2020, it happened very rarely that I felt so happy and proud of myself. And so being in Fringe 2000, Hollywood Fringe 2021, after a pandemic, after all the things we've been through, we are survivors and we have a sort of duty to show up on the stage and tell people that everything is fine, it's gonna be all right. Through our stories, even if our stories are sad, but we artists are those people that take care of people's soul. And we have this duty. We have to restore the hope for a future, even if we talk about our past, even if we talk about, for what concerns me, a past that is heavy, a past that, almost destroyed us. But we are the result of the fact that we can survive to everything if we are here, if we put our heart and our mind in our lives and we open our experience to others. The worst part of this pandemic, beside the smell of death everywhere and the fear of losing our beloved, has been the solitude, the loneliness, and a lot of us don't have the tools to analyze what's going on inside of us. Artists have this job to do. We have to give people the tools to understand what's going on inside of them. Through our imagination, we help them to figure it out. And it's our job to give them some hope. So I don't consider myself, of course, like Shakespeare, but I know that my story and the fact that after 2 years of pandemic, having a roof over our head, still being able to dream and to have hope for the future can be an injection of positivity for people. And for me, this year, in this moment, it's more than enough.
I first heard about the Hollywood Fringe Festival in my first year of my PhD program at the University of Southern California, in this sort of slightly strange program called Media Arts and Practice, where the PhD students, graduate students, are doing a hybrid of kind of what you might call a creative practice and research. And my practice is kind of performance, and what I'm researching, the maybe simplest way to describe it that hopefully wouldn't bore folks, is kind of what is the friction between contemporary modes of capitalism and processes of death and dying. And so I as part of my coursework, was in a solo performance class with a professor there and someone who's been long associated with Fringe in Hollywood, Deborah DeLiso. And I was developing a one person show in that class called The Last PowerPoint, which was about, sort of corporate business development person being, trying to sort of share the urgent thing that they need to tell people about, but without their PowerPoint presentation. For some reason, it's failed or isn't available. And what happens when you don't have a PowerPoint presentation to help comfort and guide you. And so in some ways, it was responding to my own practice of frequently utilizing PowerPoint in performance and imagining what would happen if it wasn't there, and why I'm so reticent to do that in my performance. And Deborah, working with her in the class, encouraged me to submit the performance or develop it into kind of a full play and submit it to the Hollywood Fringe Festival. And I hadn't heard about it up to that point. And being someone not from Los Angeles, I think maybe was a little bit skeptical at first of what it would mean to be doing theater in Hollywood, given that I do performance. I consider myself a performer, but not I never have really considered myself a theatrical performer. It's been maybe more aligned with what you might call performance art. Not that there's a firm distinction, but some people might make a distinction. And just through working with Deborah, was told that no, Hollywood Fringe Festival is a very different kind of experience than you might expect with being around a lot of kind of actors and performers in Hollywood. And she was completely right. One of the things that was really helpful in terms of feeling excited about participating in the Fringe Festival was the tremendous effort that a lot of the folks at Fringe and at some of the venues made to allow people to understand what the experience actually would be and how deeply rooted it is in social connections, as opposed to just trying to promote and get people to come see your show. And so, so I've done the Fringe Festival once before in 2019, was going to do it in 2020, but for COVID. And for this year, now that Fringe will be back on in Hollywood in a form, given that there's still some caution around COVID and its possible effects on people who are coming to attend, really wanted to get back into sharing the things that I'm working on, but also seeing the things that other people are kind of going out of their way to share and have put a lot of energy and love into. That's also a tremendous part of the experience of Fringe. It's not only sharing with people who you're excited to meet and learn about what you're working on, but also to, get a chance to have shared with you the things that they're, equally passionate about, but coming from the very different places that other people come from. So I think it was really that first experience at Fringe that made me want to do it again. And then that desire to do it again, led to what am I concerned about right now? What am I working through right now? And the play kind of emerged out of that.
When did I hear about the Hollywood Fringe Festival? I've known about the Fringe. I did the Fringe with LA Women Theater. I was in a company, probably about 2009, I think it was 2009 or 10. I was in a play with the LA Women Theater. I can't think of the name of it offhand right now. So I've known about it. I've been to a couple of Fringe shows throughout the years. then a few years ago, I applied for a diversity scholarship for a show I wanted to do, and I didn't get it. So I couldn't get the financing together. And then I was going to apply last year, and last year happened. But yeah, there was something about, I just said this year, I think you can write a piece and you write it and you work on it, and then at some point you have to put it out there. At some point you have to say, okay, I worked on it, I can develop it, but it's kind of like a baby or a child. You at one point have to say, okay, am I gonna keep the kid at home forever, or am I gonna let it go and see what happens? And I felt that happily ever after with a piece that was ready to go and to fly, and I was ready to let this baby go.
When did I first hear about the Hollywood Fringe and what made me want to be involved in this festival? Okay, so I'm a computer geek. I've been a computer geek for like 30 years, self-employed. And I moved out here to LA 4 years ago to be near my daughter. And a month after I got here, her and her husband moved to Dallas, Texas. And I struggled finding computer work. Not struggle, I didn't want to do it. There's the honesty, right? So I did Lyft and Uber. And there's a huge story there that I'd like to tell, but I don't know. You want me to do it now? I could do that now. And all right. So I love Rent. I've gone to Broadway several times to see it. I'm not going to skirt the issue, and I'm not going to do the filter because I'm not very good with filters. And this is a story, no matter what. This is the message. This is the play. This is what I share. I have 24 years clean and sober. So I got into recovery because I was a hot mess. And at 5 years clean and sober, I found out I had HIV after, the day I got back from a Middle East trip. I went to Amman, Jordan in 2002, a year after 9/11. And I was out on the Jordan River, and I had a nice little moment with my higher power. And hey, when I get back to Massachusetts, it might stink, but as long as I stay clean and sober, we're going to do this. The day I got back, I found out I got a registered letter saying I was HIV positive. So now that Rent play that I had seen before meant even more. And when I would go and see it, tears would stream down my face, not because I was sad, but just because I realized that, I got this disease. I got tested and I had 68 T cells, which meant I had full-blown AIDS. And but I didn't find it necessary to get high, not necessary to kill myself, And Jonathan Larson died at the age of 35, the night before it went on Broadway or the day of. But he died. So he wasn't able to see how great his play was. So now I'm out here in LA. My daughter moved to Texas. I tried working in treatment, didn't like that very much. And now I'm driving Lyft and Uber. I pick up a 92-year-old man. I'm going to go fast for this. I picked up a 92-year-old man at Santa Monica. He's going to downtown LA. So I'm driving down the 10. It's like 11 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, he tells me I'm 92 or something. I'm like, 92? And I'm like, what's the meaning of life? And like, I got a live one in my car, right? 92. I said, what's the meaning of life? He says, I'm just trying to stay alive. And I'm like, yeah, all right. And we go back and forth. I tell him about my daughter. He told me he's from New York. He moved out to be near his daughter. So we're commiserating. We're going down the street. I'm like, well, if you had it to do over again, what would you do? He's like, I'm done, no ambition. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm out here. I'm too young to give up. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. I don't want to be a movie star. And what would you do? I asked him. He said he'd be a writer. He said, what would you like to do? And I told him, well, I love the rock opera Tommy, and I like the way Godspell and Rent and these plays. I mean, I haven't seen The Lion King. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't seen. Like, you haven't seen this, you haven't seen that. And I'm like, no, I haven't. But He said, what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to write a rock musical about spiritual principles, because that's what recovery is. It's like replacing your denial with self-awareness, replacing your lying with some honesty, replacing your hiding with some transparency. And he laughed at me. I said, why are you laughing? He says, I only know 2 people who were successful at writing musicals. I'm like, in 92, you knew how to get a lift, and 2 people, I know more than 2, but who do you got? And he said, Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm like, wow, you're 92 and you know how to get a lift and you know about Hamilton. I said, that's pretty impressive. I said, but you said you know 2. Who's the other one? He said, my son. I said, your son? What did your son write? And he said, Rent. I said, you're Jonathan Larson's father? And he said, yeah, last time I checked. And by then I was at his house and or wherever. I can't, yeah. And I let him out the car, and I'm like, the thing that recovery's done with me, rather than thinking about how could I exploit this opportunity, how could I exploit this man, take his number. I'm like, I'm sorry about your son, but I love his musical and it's helped my life a lot. It's inspired me when I've been struggling. And he got out the car and people say, oh, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you? Because the same power in the universe, the synchronicity, the kismet, the whatever that put him in my car would give me what I needed when I needed. So I've been working on this for 3 years, and this is a long story to tell you about Rent, but the Lift people, I started working on it when I was, I play the CD, which is a little narcissistic because I'm trying to figure out which songs to keep, which ones, because I got like 130. So I'm ready to go to Broadway after this, but that's another story. So, people would get in the car, and not always, oh, what is this? And I'd say, oh, it's me. And they're like, no, this is you. And somebody, told me I should look into Fringe. So in 2019, I went, Matt Quinn, great guy, Matt Ritchie. I started, figuring out who the vanguard was of the Fringe. And I realized I wasn't ready for prime time. I took their classes. I highly recommend anybody do it. And I just, I volunteered with Stina Peterson for the Hollywood Fringe, and I volunteered for Matt. So I'd be the guy out front telling you to use the toilet before the show. I'd be telling you to leave your waters in the lobby. But I did it so that I could learn the ins and outs. And I knew I wasn't ready yet. I thought I was going to be ready. And then the fall last year, I was ready to do it in 2020. And COVID hit, so I didn't do it. So now I'm here. But people, when I was Lyft and Uber driving, I heard at least twice, why don't you look into the Fringe? And I did, because I'm a geek and I can use search engines. So
I heard about the Fringe a while ago. My musical started out as a feature film, because I've made a bunch of shows and I had an audience for them, and I wanted to make a feature film. So I wanted to make a stage show. So I did. I wrote Authenticity the Musical as a stage show, and then COVID happened, and I realized that it wasn't super easy to put on a stage show at this time. But I already had the film, degree. I mean, I didn't have the degree, but like I was already working in film. Like TV shows came so much more natural to film, to production. I already had a bunch of teams for that. So I was like, I might as well use the resources I have instead of jump into a new thing right this second. So then we filmed the movie, and that like kind of worked for COVID and itched the scratch. I wanted to get this film out. And when we started sending it to film festivals, and me realizing the message still isn't really enough yet, is when I was like, okay, there's no better time than now while this is in film festivals, let's put this into the Fringe Festival. So that way we're promoting through the theater industry while this is like premiering in other film festivals. So now we are trying to, there was like no better time for this show than to show up at film festivals, see this movie playing for audiences, be like, hey, come to my Fringe show. And, going to the Fringe show being like, hey, the movie's going to come out in a couple months. So I thought it would be best to cross promote through that. And really, like, I mean, the most important part of it is also just the message. I was like coming out of COVID. I need Fringe as a platform to affordably tell this story about like cyberbullying and technology, because I feel like it was at an all-time high for the past year. And somebody came to me and said it would be a good show in the Fringe Festival, and I was like, oh, this would be great. We were gonna go to Edinburgh, but I was like, that's a little too bold. So we decided to start at the Hollywood Fringe Festival, and that's when I realized it's more important that we reach high schools with teenagers in America right now. And I think the Hollywood Fringe Festival will hopefully be my first connection to any of these high schools to really talk about cyberbullying. And I just it to be local in the area, so I could help facilitate the transition from the Fringe Festival stage to high schools to community theaters. Like, I don't want it to be on Broadway. I just want it to be accessible to the age it's written for, which is like teenagers and young adults.
So I first heard of the Hollywood Fringe Festival, I think it was back in 2018, 2019, when right near the conception of P3 Theater Company. I was just diving into everything in the theater community in LA and Orange counties. And I heard of this Fringe Festival and I thought, well, what is this? So I looked them up and saw what they were about. And I thought, okay, well, I'm starting a theater company. I can't really put a main stage musical into an event like the Hollywood Fringe Festival. But at the same time, I was also developing my one-person cabaret show. So in 2019, I actually applied to be in the Hollywood Fringe Festival and bring my one-person cabaret show, The Theater is a Lady, to the Fringe Festival. But the month that I wanted to premiere my cabaret show in the Fringe was very close to the grand opening of P3 Theater Company. And I became so caught up in trying to start a theater company and do a huge musical that I had to back out of the Fringe that year. So I didn't end up doing it in 2019, but it's always been in the back of my mind. We all know that they didn't do one in 2020, and we all know why, so I'm not even going to say that. But over this last year, through the pandemic, we created a virtual production of a musical sketch comedy review show called Funny Bones, The Humorous Solution. And in getting to know a little bit more about what the Hollywood Fringe Festival is about, the style of that show being a sketch comedy musical review seemed to be a really good fit for something like the Fringe Festival. And now with the world starting to revolve again and theater, live theater beginning to happen, I thought the Hollywood Fringe Festival 2021 would be a fantastic place to take the virtual production of Funny Bones, update some of the material, and present it at the Hollywood Fringe Festival and see if it could have some legs to stand on to actually bring it to the Southland on a regular basis and have it be a recurring show for locals and tourists alike.